The Codex of Power is a brand new system in Diablo 4 that lets us unlock legendary aspects either by progressing in the story of the game or by doing difficult dungeons, and these will essentially then give us the base version of these aspects, which we can use a vendor in the game and actually imprint these on gear. Now, in the betas, we were able to see 114 of these aspects. It's entirely possible that with the full release of the game, there could be more, but at the very least, these 114 break down to 15 shared aspects, which can be used by any of the 5 classes, and then 20 each to each one of the classes except Rogue, which has 19. However, today, we're going to be looking at the 20 aspects which we have in the Codex of Power for the Druid. Starting us off is aspect of Mending Stone, a aspect which specifically targets Earthen Bulwark, which arguably is the best defensive skill in the game. This essentially says that the duration of the skill is increased by 6 seconds. In addition, killing an enemy with earth skills replenishes a certain amount of your active Earthen Bulwark's barrier. Now, I mentioned this in each one of these videos, but of course this is the base version of this aspect, and you are able to find better versions with better stats out in the wilds on gear, which you can then obviously strip off and replace on your items. So this is just a way for you to essentially keep strengthening the barrier effect of Earthen Bulwark, is basically keeping it up for longer. And since Earthen Bulwark is a phenomenal defensive skill for the Druid, I think anything that lets you get more utility, more timing out of it is absolutely beneficial, and I really do see a place for this on my gear. Then we have aspect of Quicksand, which says that damage from earth skills slow enemies hit by 25% for 5 seconds. Now, this very much plays into the archetype of earth skills on the Druid, which are all about specifically CCing enemies and also slowing them, and this basically just adds on to that effect here. So any of your earth skills will slow enemies by 25%. I like the fact that this does not have a percentage chance to proc. This is just flat out anything that you hit with earth skills are gonna get slowed by 25% for 5 seconds, and that's just really damn good. Then we have aspect of the Calm Breeze. Now, this is based off of lucky hit, meaning like you have to get a lucky hit proc for this to fire off. And then once you get that lucky hit proc, this says that Wind Shear has up to a 5% chance to fully restore your spirit, which is huge. Spirit is of course the primary resource of the Druid, and you use this to cast all of your spells, or rather your skills. And I would consider the Druid to be one of the more resource hungry classes. Most of your really powerful spells or skills like Landslide actually they cost quite a bit of spirit. So something that's able to give you back essentially all of your spirit is pretty good. Now, if you stack this behind lucky hit, we really have to see how often we can get this to proc per minute or per 5 minutes. And that really we will only be able to tell with some testing, but certainly just on paper the idea of fully replenishing your spirit seems kind of really cool. Then aspect of the Changeling's Debt is next. It says that damaging a poisoned enemy with a werebear skill will instantly deal 120% of the poisoning damage and consume the poisoning. Now, right off the top of my head, there are a couple of different ways in which you can actually poison enemies. I know Vine Creeper can do it if I'm not mistaken, but of course then there are a bunch of werewolf skills which can actually do this. So this would essentially then mean that you need to poison them either with Vine Creeper or with whatever effect you have available to you, and then use any werebear skill, whether that's a slam or something like that, and then you'll basically deal all of that poison damage and you'll consume the status. I think it's entirely possible that, and again, I would say that out of the 5 classes, Druid is probably the one that I've given the least amount of time to. I would say that knowing what I know about this class, when you get to mid to late, you're probably gonna commit to one specific playstyle, meaning like you are gonna go like a let's say Earth Caster, or you're gonna go something with lightning, or you're potentially gonna go for something that capitalizes on the, let's say, barbarian like quality that the werebear status has, compared to, like, for instance, the rogue quality that the werewolf has. So I don't know how much chance there's going to be for this overlap between werebear and werewolf, and unless this effect is really powerful, which It starts at 120%, so of course this can go way up. This would definitely require some testing, but at the moment right now, this doesn't necessarily, you know, make my spider sense tingle. Then we have aspect of cyclonic force, and this says that Cyclone Armor, which is a defensive ability obviously for the druid, also provides physical damage reduction, which is good. In addition, Cyclone Armor will also be applied to all nearby allies, and this is pretty damn sweet. Oftentimes when we think about skills in the game, we think about, you know, just the intrinsic benefit that they have to us, you know, as, you know, like our own class, our own player. But in situations where you might be grouping up for content, you might be playing with some buddies, you might be trying to do a world boss, or you might be trying to do some difficult nightmare dungeon, absolutely the ability to actually use some of your skills to not only benefit yourself but your group is kind of huge. And I certainly think that Cyclone Armor has potentially a place in the late game, where it's going to start becoming more about mitigating damage, or let's say as important to mitigate or deal with damage as it is to actually push damage out, which is not necessarily the case at the beginning of the game. So this might be one to just keep a little bit of an eye on. Then we have aspect of the rampaging werebeast. Love the name. The duration of Grizzly Rage is increased by a second. Now, of course, this can go up. In addition, critical strikes while Grizzly Rage is active increases your critical strike damage by a percentage for the duration. So this is I mean, depending on how high this plateaus at. So let's say at the moment right now we can see 1 second. Let's say for argument's sake, and I could probably look into this and see if I could find this detail somewhere, but I'm gonna use an example to make my point here. Let's say for instance that this can go as high as 4 seconds, or let's be, you know, even kind and say 6 seconds. Then this is going to you know, if your Grizzly Rage, for example, if you can get it to last, you know, like 10 seconds, this is going to give you another 6 seconds on top of that, which is pretty much 50% additional time, and that's a huge amount of additional uptime that you could be potentially dealing damage. Now this all depends on how powerful the melee build for druid ends up being. So this could be something that's like an auto include if you're doing that, just due to the fact that this is beefing up your critical strike damage, which is always good. But if it's a case of that this is, you know, underperforming compared to something like half minion half casted druid, then this might kind of like just be extremely underwhelming. Aspect of retaliation is next, and this says that your core skills deal up to a percentage increased damage based on your amount of fortify. Now this has potential. In fact, this has a huge amount of potential, and that's simply due to the fact that the druid is possibly, with the exception of the barbarian, the best class for stacking fortify, just due to the fact that it's so easy for the druid to stack fortify. A lot of the druid skills kind of have that built in. By you just picking those skills, you are unlocking a way for you to build fortify, and this is just going to help your core skills, meaning, you know, like if you hit something with a landslide or something like that, that's just going to deal a lot more damage based on your level of fortify. It's also super important to just take bear of one, or, you know, take notice of one fact here, and that is this says that you just have to have fortify. You don't have to be fortified, which is of course the activated version of fortify, where you have more, you know, fortify value than you have active life. So this just means that even if you have like 5% of your HP as fortify, then you're still going to get some additional effect, and this can potentially be really good. Then we have aspect of the Tempest. Hurricane damage is increased by a percentage each second while active. Now, I messed around with Hurricane the last day of the second beta, and I started seeing some really impressive numbers. I kind of really liked what I saw Hurricane was doing, and that was not me having known about the existence of this aspect, and obviously I didn't have it on my gear, but this basically, you know, just seems like a really sexy ramp on Hurricane. And since Hurricane was already impressing me a little bit with its damage, this can absolutely be good. So this would be something that I would look into. I'm probably going to be trying to at some point build a, like I mentioned before, I think I mentioned it in one of the aspects, a half pet half elementalist druid, something like that, and I'd like to see if that's viable, and in that case this is probably something that would feature there. Aspect of the unsatiated. After killing an enemy with shred, your next werewolf skill generates a percentage more spirit and deals a percentage more damage. Now, see, this is what I was kind of talking about. So I think aspects which expect you to lean into both forms, both werewolf and werebear, might be a little bit, hit and miss. But I think ones which essentially double down on the identity of a transform like werewolf here and just gives you really good benefits, in this case more spirit and more damage, that's dope as hell. So I definitely think that if you are planning on spending any amount of time as a werewolf instead of a human, then this might be one you want to go for. Then we have aspect of the earth sign horror, which says that pulverize is now also an earth skill. Now, after casting pulverize, tectonic spikes continue to deal damage over 2 seconds. I think that this could be pretty good. Due to the fact that you have a lot of aspects and a lot of effects in the game which proc off of whether you used a earth skill or a wind skill or a lightning skill, this certainly can help you kind of like have something that hovers in the werebear earth category, something like that. Since werebear has a lot of slams, a lot of like things that essentially deal damage over a huge amount of area in melee range, this kind of seems like a cool way for you to just deal additional damage to pretty much everything that surrounds your point of impact and where you're attacking. That might actually be pretty good. Ballistic aspect. This is that when you have fortify, your earth skills gain +2 ranks. Again, druid is exceptionally good at having at least some form of fortify on them. This, if you have like 1% fortify, then this shit is active. And this is pretty damn sweet, basically giving you +2 ranks to all of your earth skills. That means if you have 5 out of 5 on a skill, this pushes it to 7 out of 5, which obviously in the case of damage kills increases the damage profile. In the case of utility skills and things that do CC, this can potentially increase the times of those. So this is probably just like you kind of like just definitely want to put this on if you are in any way stacking fortify, which, let's be honest, if you're playing druid, you're stacking fortify. So if you're using earth skills, it's kind of like silly not to put this on unless there's something else that really is a lot better. Moving along, crash stone aspect. Now this says earth skills deal 40%, this number can go up, more critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. Now again, really good here if you're leaning into earth skills, because 9 out of 10 or 90% of earth skills have a way to also CC enemies, whether they're slowing them or stunning them or something like that. So those enemies are going to be crowd controlled already, and then you're just hitting them for a lot more critical strike damage. So if any of those skills have a high crit strike coefficient, or you stack critical strike chance on your character, this is just going to push out really chunky hits. Then we have Mangled aspect, which I'm guessing is something for one of the animals without even reading it. When you are struck as a werebear, you have a 20% chance to gain 1 spirit. This is, I mean, the 20% can obviously go up, and I imagine that this number 1 here can also probably go up. So then in this case, this can just be, a way for you to just have spirit be ticking in the background as you're taking hits. If you are playing a werebear, you are kind of like extremely tanky and you are in a situation where you can take some damage. This is gonna be good if you are doing a dungeon or something like that, where literally, oodles and oodles of trash mobs are charging you down, and you have 5, 6, 7, 8 enemies hitting you at a time as you're busy chewing your way through them. This is just gonna make your spirit like just run up like a something that runs up really fast. I just could not get a fucking example in my head there now. But yeah, it's just gonna fill up pretty fast, and it's a good way for you to basically get something for taking damage. But I don't know, in my opinion, I'd rather just find a way to mitigate that damage and get my spirit elsewhere. Depending on taking damage for you to get your spirit, or if you look at that as one of your replenishment mechanics, might be a bit of an issue if you're going up against a boss or 1 or 2 enemies at a time, because then this is really not gonna have that profound of an effect, so not that impressive. Then Night Howlers aspect. Blood Howl increases critical strike chance by 5%. In addition, Blood Howl also affects nearby companions and players for 3 seconds. Now, this this obviously this amount can go up, and again this leans into critical strike chance, which is always good if you build that onto your character. Critical strike chance, critical strike damage, it's just going to help with really powerful hits. And again, this is our second aspect on the druid side that actually shares its effect with nearby companions and players. Now this is an important distinction here, because this is not just nearby players, but it's also nearby companions. So your wolves, your bats, your vine creeper, they're actually going to get this benefit as well. I think pet druid might be a little bit sexy in the mid game. This is their minions, their companions got a huge buff with the latest patch that was communicated by Blizzard, kind of like probably to bring them in line with what we were seeing with the necromancer, because they definitely were not performing as well. So this could be pretty cute, I guess, in a pet build. Then overcharged aspect of course benefits again from a lucky hit, and this says that has a percentage chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target for 3 seconds, causing any direct damage you deal to them to pulse additional damage to surrounding enemies. So pretty much what this is, in my mind really plays into the identity of how lightning should work. I like the idea of this effect. Now whether you're going to get it to proc a lot is a different thing, but essentially what this means is that when you hit stuff with lightning, then every once in a while when you lucky hit and you hit this percentage chance, you're going to turn a target into its own lightning emitter, and whenever your next spells hit them or whatever hits them next, they're going to pulse out this damage, which can be pretty good again against I can imagine this just absolutely shred its way through trash, but again probably one of those things that's not that great when you're going up against one baddie or something like that. Shepherd's aspect says that core skills deal an additional percentage amount of damage for each active companion. Now this is where the whole pet build thing comes in, because let's say for argument's sake you're a fucking complete masochist and you take your druid, you put on something like Earth Spike as your basic skill, you put on something like Upheaval as your core skill, and then you add like all three pet classes here. So that's gonna give you the wolves, of which there are 3. Now I don't know for each active companion. To me that means that from fucking having wolves out, you are getting, in this example here where it's 6%, you're getting 18% additional damage. Then in the case of the bat, I think you have by default 1 bat, but you can also have more bats or something. So let's say for argument's sake you can get another 3 bats there, that's another 18%, and then you have your vine creeper running around on the ground, which is another 6% on its own. So that's 42% in total when you add all of those together. 42% additional damage on landslide, which already hits like a Mack fucking truck. Seems like it could be kind of cute. I don't know if there's a case to be made for running wolves and bats and vine creeper, but I can certainly imagine a situation where wolves together with vine creeper and then a bunch of other shit can be good, and this will probably be pretty sexy with that. Skinwalker's aspect says that when you use a shape-shifting skill, meaning like when you turn into a werebear or a werewolf, that changes your form, you gain some life. When you're at full life, you gain the same amount as fortified. This is if you are going to lean heavily into the shapeshifter meta with the druid, and you're going to be using, let's say, 1 or 2 werewolf skills as like your poison skills or your gap closing skills or something like that, and you're going to use 2 or 3 bear skills for your slams and that sort of thing, then this is just gonna, and if you work out a healthy thing where you essentially you cycle those skills regularly and all of that, and you're already building fortify from other sources, everything like that, so you're going to gain life, and as soon as you hit that life cap, you're just going to start stacking up fortify. This just seems really, really good as just an engine for building fortify, because you are playing melee. If you are playing werebear and werewolf, you're constantly going to be in the face of damage, so it's going to be important for you to mitigate some of that damage, and this definitely seems like an extremely healthy way of doing that. Stormclaw's aspect is next, and this says that critical strikes with shred deal 20% of the damage dealt as lightning damage to the target and surrounding enemies. Again, Shred, I like the fact that this just flat out says that when you critical strike with Shred, so if you build a lot of critical strike into your build, critical strike chance meaning into your build, then you're just going to deal this additional damage as lightning damage to the target and surrounding enemies. Now, generally speaking, when you are playing melee characters, oftentimes the problem that you have is that you might be exceptionally good at dealing damage to a single target, but you kind of suck like having to chew your way through like 20 enemies. This certainly addresses that complaint. Storm Shifter's aspect says that while Hurricane is active, you gain 2 ranks to your shape-shifting skills. So I think, look, Hurricane, of course, you know, creates this AoE area around you that pretty much, you know, deals damage and slows enemies, and it can be, you know, augmented in different ways. It is a good idea to probably include that in, you know, any kind of shape-shifting build, whether you are changing into a bear or into a werewolf, because in both of those cases, all of your skills require you to go right up to a bunch of enemies and hit them in the face, and then your Hurricane is also going to hit those enemies. So that's kind of cool. And for the same reason that I like the fact that we had the aspect that increased your earth skills by, you know, 2, this just kind of seems like, you know, another good reason to get that. Then Vigorous Aspect says that you gain 10%, well, it can be more, damage reduction while shapeshifted into a werewolf. Now, there are I guess it's unique items. I definitely saw this somewhere. I need to go rack my brain and figure it out. But there are items, there are aspects, there are things in the game which allow you to essentially stay in either one of the 2 forms permanently. How the druid works is when you use a skill that is a werewolf skill, for the duration of the use of that skill, you change into a werewolf, and then if you use a werebear skill, you change to a werebear, or when you shoot a fucking spell or something like that, you change back into the human form of druid. This pretty much, you could, for instance, you know, have this aspect of this unique or something like that that keeps you in werewolf form the whole time, regardless of what you do, whether you're casting spells or not, and then that's just going to give you flat damage reduction, which is pretty sexy. Just having like flat damage reduction out of the fucking gate without you having to do anything because you are already a werewolf and you stay a werewolf is pretty dope. And goddamn, we made it. That is all 20 of the legendary aspects which are in the Codex of Power as far as we know right now for the druid. Now, as I did with the previous 2 videos that I did, and I will continue on doing with the remaining ones, I will pick the 3 ones which I'm kind of like, I would say, excited for the most. That's not to say that they will be broken as fuck, but I'm excited to find them, to unlock them, and to try and use them in builds. Now, with the druid, funnily enough, it was really tough for me to pick my favorite 3 because there's a bunch of these that are kind of spicy and that I want to get my hands on. But in no particular order, I think Ballistic Aspect is fucking insane. The fact that whenever you have Fortify, all of your earth skills just get +2 ranks is pretty sexy. Aspect of Retaliation is really good as well, due to the fact that you get this massive boost to your damage just by having Fortify again. And then last but certainly not least, Aspect of Mending Stone, in the way that it just kind of, you know, increases your uptime on Earthen Bulwark, which I think is a phenomenal skill and probably one of the highlights of the druid for me. Is just really good, and I think it's going to be one of those situations where if you are running Earthen Bulwark and you're not running this, people are going to ask you, you know, what's wrong with you. But that's my, you know, that's my 3 picks. Let me know which ones, you know, are tickling your fancy. Let me know if you are planning on running druid day 1, and if so, what is your build of choice? How are you going to do that? I did most recently release a build per class of what I would consider my beginner builds as we all start the game in June, so absolutely check that out. I do also want to remind you of a competition, a giveaway that I've got running at the moment right now. There's a link in the description below which you can go to. It's a video, a short video that details how you can enter this competition. I am giving away 3 copies of the base version of Diablo 4 on the platform of your choice. I will be doing a live draw of those 3 winners on the 1st of June in a live stream, so you'll be able to figure out there whether you're one of the lucky winners, and I absolutely wish you luck that you are one of them. But I also do want you to have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. Until next video, fucking cheers.